So since you have the ability to control this, one thing you're going to see is that Bootstrap has a grid system. And the grid system is going to be based on these breakpoints. And this is basically at the level that we're at. I just want you to understand these different breakpoints. So when the screen is less than 554 pixels, it's going to start out, basically, the screen's going to start out small. And based on when it gets pulled out and wider, it will start to respond. So if you use medium small breakpoints, it's going to go into its horizontal. So it's going to be stacked up till this point. It's going to be stacked up till 720 when you use the medium. It's going to be stacked up until 940 when you use the large, and 1140 or 1140 when you use the extra large. So it's not going large to small, it's going from small to large. And so that's something to, if you're looking to change when it snaps into its second, into its levels. And so that is something to consider. So at this particular point, mine's changing at the 900 and some breakpoints, but you can change that and adjust it. And so basically, what I'm wanting to basically begin doing is thinking about the way you lay out this page. So you have your flexible container that's going to hold rows. So for instance, you have a row, and then in that row you can have other columns. So you have your flexible container, you'll have a row class, a div that's designated as a class of a row. Then in that you can put in other divs that have specific widths. So in this particular case, my outer column is going to be, my outer div is going to be flexible, so it responds. My row is going to be holding a column that has a width of so many units of 12. So I want it to basically be a portion of the entire width. So for instance, this might be 10, and this might be 2, or and that would add up to 12. So it's a little bit more than halfway, so maybe 10 and 2. Then I would get those columns, and they would be kept inside of the row. I could go on and put in another row. I'm going to put in a row, and that could hold maybe 3 columns, or maybe just one on the left, one on the right. And so I could divide up this 12 grid into 3 equal parts. It doesn't have to be equal. This could be 1, this could be 6, and this could be whatever else you need. So you can break it up into however you want it. And that's the idea. Alright? If you wanted these to be equal, these would be 4. If you just wanted 2. So that's kind of where that's the ultimate thing I'm trying to stress. Alright. So this content is here just as a way to show some content. But I want to begin by laying in my first container div. And so I want to stay organized, and notice that when I'm in Dreamweaver I can kind of get the hints for what it is that I'm doing. I can say div, and for the most part I can start out by saying it's going to be a class, and I can say what kind of class, container, and it's going to be a fluid container. Alright, if I close that tag and I put in my backslash, I'll close that div. Now I know that this content below, it's not in there. This content here is not inside of it, but for now I've got a simple div, and it is a fluid container. Now I'm going to put in a comment here that allows me to say end container. And I can also give this an ID that will allow me to give it a something. So if I want to, I can use this ID equals main container. Okay, so now I have an ID of main container. That gives me end main container. And now that gives me the ability to write a piece of CSS that can be used to style my main container so I can see it. I'm going to save this page right now. Okay, and I'll go to my styles sheet and I can add my hashtag. And since I have a main container ID, it pops up, so I can grab that. And what I'm going to simply do is just do background color. And again, I want to give it a simple color, and just to change the color, I'm just going to put in a very simple medium gray, and there is my container popping up. Now I'm going to go back, I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to my source code, and just so I can take up a little bit more space, I can take this, Control Cut, and I could put it inside of that container. And if I did, then I have that container holding that information. But this is my, now if I hit Control Save and I went to, and I hit F12 to bring this up in a browser, it's not going to be anything that amazing, but I can see that it's working. Alright, so I'm going to continue on. So now I want to add a row. So this is going to be my first row. I'm going to say div, and I'm going to say a class, and I'm going to put an R for row, and I'm going to say it's a row. I'm going to say backspace div, and then I'm going to put my comment in, row end. Now I'll give it a name, so I'm closing that out, and I'm just going to give it an ID, equals, I'll just call it row 1. So I have an ID called row 1, and it's class row, and it is inside of my main container, and now I have it over here and it's coming up. Now just to keep things specific, I'll just give it a color. I'm going to give myself some room here. So I've got a hashtag. Now I know there's another ID. It knows there's an ID in my code. Again, I will give it a color. Now I'm just going to begin with these basic color changes so I can just see them. So I'm just going to go down. I'm going to go up 7, 7, 7, just so I can see the basic color change. If I want to go back and place content in that row, I could just move this inside of here, and then I can see that will be inside of my row. So I have a row, and I have my main container, I have my row, I want to make sure I keep everything closed, and I have my main container. If I look at this, I have my div, and then I have my main container here, and I'm going to have my row here. I want to make sure I've got everything right and inside of one another. Now I always like to kind of just make sure style, and if I said this row's width, I'm going to alphabetize this. So I'm going to say the width, I'm just going to give it a 900 pixels just to see if I can squish it a little bit. See, there it is. So that is inside of that. Control save. I'll look at it on my browser. I'll go back to my page, I'll refresh it and see if it's going to show up. Make sure that I have everything right. And if I have an error, I want to try to see what might be wrong. Control save. Control save. There we go. So my code didn't get saved. So here is my row. Here is my fluid container. Alright. Now, nothing really exciting is happening right now, but it is working. My colors are obviously being defined, and I have containers within containers. Now I want to add a couple things. Now inside that row, inside my row 1, I want to add some new content. So in my row 1, I want to add a column. I'm going to put 2 columns. I'm going to div in. I'm going to make a div. That div is going to be of the class column, and I can choose the size and what I want. Now I like to work with just a simple medium breakpoint, so I'm going to say that this is going to be that's alphabetical, sorry, medium, and I'm going to go with my example. I'm going to say 10, so I'll go, no, 10 and 2 is a little bit. I'm going to go 8 and 4. 8 backspace div. So here's my first, and I'm going to put in here column 10, and I'm going to give this the ID of column 10. So I have an ID of column 10, and it's a class. Oh shoot, I didn't mean that. I want 8, column 8, not 10, column 8. Alright, so if over here, here's my column 8, and I'm just labeling it so I can see it. And then quickly, I'm going to say div. I've got a div. It's going to be a class, and it's going to be column. Since that's a 10 and I want this to equal, I'm going to say medium 4. So on medium 4, and I'm going to close that and close that. I'm going to say column 4, just to give it something, and I'll give it the ID column 4. Oops, no space. So if I've done it properly, I should have 2 columns, column 8, column 4, and they are going to be inside of my row. And here's my row, and here's some other content. I'm just going to take this. I'm just going to comment this out for a second, and I will just kind of hide it so it's gone. Alright, now I could give these to a specific color, which I'll do quickly. I'm going to hit Control Save. I'm going to go to my browser real quick and see what I have. There's my column 4 and column 8. They're both side by side, and I'm going to check that out in a second. Okay, I'm going to say Style, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say column, hashtag, and it's going to know there's column 8, and I'm going to give it a color. I'll give it a background color. Here, I'll just copy this. Copy. Background color, and I'll just make it, I'll make it darker. Let's see, a little bit darker. I'll say 333, and then I'll say column, hashtag column 4, and I will make that black just so I can distinguish it. And I'll test it out, make sure I had made no errors, and I may have. And I do want to make sure that everything works. And if I've gotten this far and I see there's a problem, like I don't see the color changing, I'm going to go in and I'm going to make sure I have everything right, which may take me a second to figure out. Alright, so I'm going to hit Save on both of these, and I'm going to go to my style, and I'm going to bring up my browser, and I will refresh it and see if I'm getting what I expected. Yes, I am. So I've got column 8 here, I've got my column 4 here, so here it is this way and that way. And you'll notice that It's a little hard to see because it's a little bit